Welcome to our masterclass, The Future of NetScaler Automation, App-Centric Next-Gen API. We are joined today by Konstantinos Kaltsas, Richard Faulkner, and myself. Hi, everybody. My name is Amber. Konstantinos brings over a decade of diverse experience in team management and product leadership. His career trajectory has equipped him with a well-rounded skill set, beginning as a software engineer and advancing through roles such as principal architect, product security officer, solutions architect, and product manager. In his professional journey, Konstantinos has demonstrated expertise and leadership across various domains, including digital transformation, application modernization, mobile technology, user experience, security, networking, and more. His extensive experience makes him adept at managing teams and products effectively. Currently, Konstantinos serves as a product manager for Citrix NetScaler at Cloud Software Group, where he leads multiple products and collaborates with numerous Fortune Global 100 and 500 customers. He holds a Master's of Science in Computer Science from the University of Ioannina and a bachelor's degree from the University of Pilaus, residing in Thessalonica, Greece. Konstantinos is a dedicated husband and a proud father of 2 boys. In his personal time, he enjoys seaside walks, listening to blues music, and indulging in his passion of food, wine, and spirits. Richard has been a fervent supporter of end-user computing for over 2 decades, primarily working on the reseller side, which enabled him to adapt new technologies early. Currently a solutions architect at Ferroque Systems, based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, he thrives on sharing his knowledge about technology and assisting IT staff in optimizing digital workspaces for employees. Originally from New York City, Rich has lived across the US and served as a nuclear engineer in the US Navy on submarines before transitioning to an IT career. Welcome, gentlemen. It's great to have you here with us.
Thanks for having us. Glad to be here.
NetScaler's Next-Gen API offers a streamlined approach to automated configuration, simplifying complex setups for both application developers and network engineers. This powerful RESTful API abstracts away low-level complexities, providing an intuitive, declarative interface centered around desired application states. It's designed to empower developers with limited networking expertise to efficiently manage NetScaler configurations through automation. We'll start with an overview of NetScaler, followed by a discussion on its app-centric benefits. We'll dive into the core principles of the next generation API and tackle configuration as an advanced SSL application. And after our focus session, there'll be a Q&A segment to address any specific queries you might have. So if you do have questions along the way, please make sure you add them to the chat so that we can ask our panelists those questions. We'll wrap up with a few key takeaways to ensure you have the practical insights to apply in your work with NetScaler. I'm going to hand things over to Konstantinos and Richard. You guys can take it away.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Amber.
Since its inception in the late 1990s, NetScaler has grown from a load balancing solution to a comprehensive application delivery platform, widely trusted by organizations to optimize, secure, and scale their critical services. Now a key part of Citrix's portfolio, NetScaler offers traditional application delivery controller functions and a rich set of capabilities for modern IT environments. In today's fast-moving infrastructure landscape, where automation and code-driven deployment are essential, NetScaler excels in simplifying the way infrastructure is deployed, managed, and secured. Whether you're automating your network, securing applications, or streamlining API management, NetScaler's infrastructure as code integrations empower teams to boost performance and to reduce complexity. Let us explore how NetScaler can revolutionize your deployment process, making them faster, more efficient, and highly secure. DevOps has taken the IT world by storm, creating a shift in how companies develop and manage software. Introduced as a response to the traditional disconnect between development and operations teams, DevOps emphasizes collaboration, automation, and continuous improvement. By breaking down silos, DevOps allows faster and more efficient delivery of applications and services, a key demand in today's fast-paced digital world. DevOps accelerates innovation by enabling more frequent software releases. This helps companies respond rapidly to changing customer needs and market conditions. Automation is at the heart of DevOps. Automating processes like testing, integration, and deployment allow teams to focus on value-added tasks rather than the manual work. The culture of collaboration within DevOps enhances communication and ensures better alignment between IT and business goals. Digital transformation is about leveraging technology to drive business growth, improve customer experiences, and gain competitive advantages. DevOps supports this by accelerating the development and deployment of new technologies, enabling businesses to experiment, adapt, and scale rapidly. Whether through cloud adoption, microservices, or agile methodologies, DevOps provides the tools and culture that empower businesses to transform digitally. Now I'm going to turn it over to Konstantinos so he can share what NetScaler is doing to enable digital transformation.
Thank you, Richard. So first of all, I want to say that it is my pleasure to be here. I'm really happy that we are going to have a conversation around the next generation API and how we can tackle all of the different challenges that organizations can face when it comes to either networking or application delivery, security, and everything that falls under how you can basically serve traffic for applications. Let me just say first that automation is one of the strategic initiatives that in NetScaler we are working on for many years now. As part of that, we have many solutions that we can offer. Some of the solutions are things that you can see right here on this slide. In addition to that, we have many other things like integration with third-party solutions. And all of these things is something that we are calling NetScaler Automation Toolkit. Today, we are going to focus more on what is the support that we are offering for automation through the APIs, and we are going to deep dive into the application-centric APIs. So having said that, let me just say that NetScaler has a powerful set of APIs. You can basically do any administrative operation when it comes to upgrades, certificate management, and more things. You can do any configuration that, let's say, you can apply any configuration when it comes to any NetScaler feature. There is a big list of different ways to do that. We have a micro API, a batch API, and several other endpoints that you can use. In addition to that, you can also get statistics for your applications using monitoring APIs, the Stat API, that it is part of Nitro. And of course, our Nitro API has been built having in mind how you can have a powerful query language, how you can query the existing configuration and get better understanding about what is there in NetScaler. So things like pagination, filtering, and all of these things are 100% supported. For those that prefer to use SDKs, there are available SDKs for various programming languages. All of these things, in addition to the application-centric API, which is the new API that we have introduced, are part of every NetScaler form factor. Either it is the hardware form factors, MPX or the SDX, the multi-tenant, or the VPX that can run on multiple hypervisors, or the VPX that runs, on multiple hypervisors, or the MPX that runs directly on Linux, or even the CPX that can run directly as a container. In addition to that, all of these can be deployed in multiple environments, and the API capabilities are exactly the same. But let me say that after many years that we have an API, we understood that one thing was missing: how you can work in an application-centric manner. For that reason, we have recently released a tech preview for the application-centric APIs, the next-gen API. So this is what we are going to talk about today. But why we decided to do that? There are a couple of benefits that you're going to see for your business and for your daily operations when you use the next generation API. In the past, with the Nitro API, we were offering, and we still offer, rich features both for configuration and monitoring. But Nitro API is an API that has been released many years ago. It was being updated, but because the Nitro is there for many years now, it was built on top of the CLI. So it is CLI-centric, which basically means that it is imperative and requires some knowledge of NetScaler, how NetScaler work, how you can, let's say, configure NetScaler, how the architecture of NetScaler works internally, and all of these things. In addition to that, due to the nature of an imperative API, it requires multiple steps to configure NetScaler. For the same reasons, when you are configuring NetScaler using Nitro, there is no full validation that is applied because, again, you are configuring certain portion of the configuration. You are executing steps to reach out to the final state. And due to the fact that it is imperative, also you need to form all of the different, let's say, relationships between the objects. If you would like to create, let's say, a virtual server, you also need to separately create service groups and then bind these things together, which basically means additional API calls and additional complexity. And the last thing that we always knew is that when it comes to rollbacks are not automated 100%. So if something fails, you need to figure out what went wrong, what are the configurations that you need to reverse, and all of these things. For all of these reasons, we decided to design a new API. This is something that we started around 1.5 years ago, and we decided on top of some specific principles, some things that need to be there and need to be supported. First of all, the new API is an application-centric API, which means that you can either configure or get monitoring observability-related informations for the application that you are configuring. So, as we frequently say, we want to move to an application-centric model rather than an ADC-centric model. In addition to that, for various personas out there that are not familiar with NetScaler, are not familiar with networking, we have introduced several simplified interfaces for common use cases. We are going to see a couple of use cases today. We are going to see also some slides of how you can use applications and also a demo where we can see a more advanced configuration. But the most important thing here is that the API is not only application-centric, but it is also desired state-based. So the API is declarative. It is atomic in nature, and you just need to specify what is the desired state of the system without even the need of knowing how NetScaler works and have, let's say, some networking or NetScaler background. In addition to that, we decided that we need to have static and runtime validation. The API is built using the OpenAPI 3 specification. And as part of that, you can leverage every, let's say, tool, every utility that supports the OpenAPI 3, let's say, ecosystem. But basically, due to the fact that we are relying on the OpenAPI 3 specification, we can basically do also static validations based on the schemes that we are creating in the specification itself. And last but not least, apart from being able to also create hierarchical structures, because the application is the main object of every configuration, due to the fact that you are working with an application object, also you will have automated rollbacks, because if, let's say, an application configuration went wrong, then we know what to do to reverse to the previous working state of the system. So with that, let's see some additional benefits of the next generation API. So as I said, the next gen API is a suite of app-centric declarative REST APIs. And our main goal here is how we can enable automation for you. So by taking this approach, you will just need to focus on your application. The next generation API is going to take care of the rest, meaning you don't need to learn NetScaler, you don't need to work on, let's say, doing rollbacks or doing all of these things. The strategy that we have followed on that is how we can introduce an application-centric model in general. So we are bringing application in the center of everything that we are doing. The first step for someone would be to define an application using the API. So as soon as you define an application, then you are going to interact with this application. As a second step, you will have a way to also get insights for this specific application. And this is also part of the roadmap that we are following. As part of the tech preview that is already out there, the configuration of the application is already supported in the tech preview. The application-centric sites will come with full support in the upcoming GA release. We are going to talk more about that in a while. And the last step is for you to also create the environment so that you can also serve your application. So imagine that the first goal will be to deploy the application, then give let's say, access to SREs, give access to also DevOps personas, or let's say other stakeholders that would like to get an understanding about the performance of the applications, the performance of the system. So in this way, you will have a way to get access to all of these things for this specific application. And the last thing, of course, would be for you to also create an environment that will serve your application. So application-centric infrastructure. Let's see now some additional benefits on that. So as I said, we are moving from let's say, Nitro modeling to the next generation API modeling. And there are significant differences in that. What we are saying is that Nitro was based on let's say, the NetScaler configuration, NetScaler terms, networking terms. So whenever you were configuring NetScaler using Nitro, you were basically configuring NetScaler entities. You were configuring load balancing things. You were configuring content switching features or application firewall, let's say, features. As part of that, whenever you needed to do some certain configurations, holistically configurations for serving the application traffic, you needed to configure first load balancing, then content switching, then other, let's say, things like application firewall configurations, and then do all of these, form all of these relationships together so that your traffic will leverage all of these configurations. And you can see this on the top right side of the screen, that also the structure that we are, let's say, offering as part of the Nitro API is based on this feature. So you will have a base endpoint /config/LBV server or /CSV server, etc. So you are basically working with these entities. Now, if we take a look on the next generation API and how the new model looks, you will see that the overall idea is to bring application in the center of what we are doing. So if you take a look of the different objects that are there, you will see that most of these things are things that application developers or DevOps teams that have never really worked with networking solutions can understand these terms, because we are talking about an application that will need some routes to route traffic basically to specific, let's say, backends. This application might have a number of front ends that will have also some TLS settings configured, or it can have some certificates configured so that the traffic will be protected. And in the similar manner, this backend will have some load balancing settings, in which way you are going to load balance the traffic to the different applications. The different replicas are there for the same applications. Also, you can also define things like health checks. You can also define things like the different policies. Let's say how I can do rewrite policies or redirect or responder or WAF configurations. And all of these things are part of an application configuration, because in many occasions you will need to protect an application. So as part of this application definition, you can enable an rate limiting, let's say, rate limiting configuration, or you might need to rewrite some, let's say, HTTP headers. So you can also add a rule there, add a policy there under the application to rewrite also some, let's say, some headers or anything that you would like to do. This is the model that we are following with a new API. And again, as you can see on the top right of the screen, we have again a base URL, and this base URL is structured based on the application. So you have the base URL / applications, and then / the application name. And if you take a closer look at the, let's say, third line, you will see that the way that this model is structured also is the way that these URLs are being structured. So if you would like to find all of the servers that are under a backend, under a specific backend, under a specific application, you will see that you just need to structure this URL: applications, application one, backends, backend one, servers. So if you would like to be more specific in the way that you are configuring or the way that you are getting, let's say, information from the API, you can leverage this model to structure also the equivalent URLs. Now, let's move forward to see some additional things about the next-gen API. One of the core principles and benefits, I would say, is that by using the next-gen API, you can basically do more with less. In typical scenarios, let's imagine a use case where you would like to apply some routing for an application. In, let's say, NetScaler terms, you would need to create a content switching virtual server with a number of content switching actions, content switching policies, all of these things. But you would like to create some routes for a number of applications. These applications also will have some replicas, meaning you will also need to load balance the traffic between the same applications. For this reason, you will also have to create some load balancing virtual servers, to create some service groups, to create some servers that will be part of this. And of course, you will need to also protect the traffic for these applications, meaning you will need also to create a certificate that will be used for this application. More or less, something like that with a Nitro API will require around 28 Nitro API calls. While with the next generation API and with a new model that we are following, you will see that you will only require 2 API calls. And as a matter of fact, this is something that we are going to cover also during the demo later on. So, but why 28 on one hand and let's say only 2 with the next gen API? The main reason for that is because first of all, you just need an API call to create the certificate, and you are passing all of this information as part of the JSON payload within the HTTP body. And the second request will be for you to create the application. But just think of the following. This application contains all of the configuration that you are doing on the right side of the screen, starting from the second block of the code, meaning everything below add cold drinks LBV server and below will be part of this application configuration. So all of these components, like the front ends that I mentioned previously, the back ends, let's say the routes and all of these things, are basically part of the application configuration, which basically means that you will only need a single API call to do all of these things. But just keep in mind that in typical use cases where you would need to scale, or you would need to add additional routes, or you will need to perform certain operations, you can move from 28 Nitro API calls to much more calls, 60 calls or 70 calls. This can increase exponentially based on the number of operations that you would like to do. With the next-gen API, you will still have to send one single call to update the application, because all of these things are part of the application. It is true that the JSON payload will be a really big, let's say, will contain a really big configuration, but it will be a single REST API call. Now, with that, let's see also an example of how the API works and what are actually the applications. So let's talk about application management and how you can manage applications, what an application is, and what is the equivalent in the Nitro, let's say, NetScaler terms. So with a new API, we are basically relying on the classic REST methods, REST HTTP methods. So basically, when you are interacting with the API, you would more or less use post, put, delete, and get methods. So post basically means create an application, put means update an application, and delete the application itself. So let's talk about how you can create an application. The only thing that you need to do is send a post request in this endpoint base URL /applications/ let's say defining the application name, and then send the JSON payload that you can see here. So you are defining an application by giving it a name, giving it a virtual IP, meaning the IP through which you are going to expose traffic to your backends. The certificate to be used in this case, so the application1 certificate, and what are the IPs to which you have deployed your applications. Imagine that you will have two, let's say, web applications, or it might be REST APIs, or whatever you will have to deploy. You will need to specify these IPs, where this has been deployed, so that you can load balance traffic between these two same applications. Now, you can pretty easily see here that several things are missing. So you're not specifying the protocol, you're not specifying ports, you're not specifying the weights for the different, let's say, IPs under servers. There are many things that are missing here. And this is one of the first decisions that we did when we started designing the API. We decided that whenever someone doesn't really want to be too specific, to specify all of these things, there will always be default values for everything. So what this application will do is, after sending this request, you will see a new entry on NetScaler named application1, and this application will be responsible to load balance traffic between these two IPs, and also, let's say, through HTTPS using this certificate. If we talk about the equivalent way to do this through Nitro, you would basically need to follow all of the steps that you can see on the bottom side of the screen, where the arrow is pointing. So you'd have to create an LBV server, to create service groups, to bind the service group to the LBV server, to create certificate, to do all of these things. These are the most typical things that you do when you would like to, let's say, load balance traffic to two applications. So we are going from all of these commands, and all of these commands that are not, let's say, self-explanatory for, let's say, non-networking folks, to something that can be perceived also from people that are application developers or DevOps, let's say, engineers. Now, after creating an application, you will need to update the application many times. So we will need to update the application also for various reasons. Let's say we will need to scale, which basically means that we will need to add one additional IP under servers. It's as simple as sending a put request, specifying the exact same JSON payload, and adding one additional IP under the server's JSON array. If we would like to add more configurations, we can do also that. You can send also one single update with multiple configurations. And when it comes to completely moving back to the original state of the system, you will only need to send a delete for this application, and NetScaler will figure out what are all of the configurations that have been done for this application and do all of the unbindings, the deletes, and all of these things. If you are working with NetScaler for much time now, you will know that if you would like to go to a previous state of the system, you really need to know well how NetScaler works, because you need to follow a reversed approach to unbind everything that is being used, delete several objects, and follow a pretty certain path to do all of this, pretty certain order. With an NextGen API, you don't really need to do that anymore. You just need to send a delete, and it will remove all relevant configurations. So these were some things that I want to share with you as let's say, about how the API works in theory. But let's see this also in practice. So in the demo that we are going to see now, we are going to cover an advanced SSL application, which means that it will be, we are going to cover what I described previously of how we can move from 28 Nitro API calls to only 2 next generation API calls. So let's get started. Let's see how we can also do something like that. So what we are going to see here is how we can create a beverages application. So this beverages application will have 2 backends, one hot drink backend and one cold drinks backend. Each one of these backends will be responsible to load balance traffic. And of course, the beverages application is going to route traffic to the first or the second application based on the domain that is going to be used. Additionally, we are going also to create a certificate, as we said when we were comparing the 2 APIs. Now, with Nitro, you would need 28 API calls. With the NextGen API, you will need only 2. But before we do that, before we deep dive into the actual commands and the actual configurations, let's also have a look in the specification. So with an NextGen API, you can configure applications, you can also configure certificates, but in addition to that, as I mentioned, you can also specifically configure backends and frontends, which are components falling under this application. And the application, of course, can have multiple operations following the REST, let's say, methods. Now, let's start with creating an application. We are going to give it a name. The name will be beverages application. We are going to specify the IP through which we are going to access this application, and of course, the protocol. Due to the fact that it is HTTPS, we are going to specify the certificate. Then we are going to have 2 backends. And for each backend, we are going to first start with only 1 server. And we are going to see later on how we can work on that. To be able to route traffic, we will need 2 routes. And each route will have a filter. The filter will work based on the host name. If the host name equals cold drinks, etc., it will go on the cold drinks application. If it starts with hotdrink.beverages.com, it will route traffic to the hot drinks. And the last thing here is also to specify the load balancing. So for today, we decided to only specify the algorithm. So we are only saying that these backends will use the round robin algorithm. Now, before we configure this, one last thing. I would like to demonstrate how the API does also validation. So for that reason, this certificate has not been installed in the system. We are expecting now to see that the certificate does not exist. And as you can see from the response, this certificate does not exist in the system. So let's move forward and configure this certificate. Again, we would need to give a name to our certificate. Then we would obviously need to provide some details like the public certificate, the private key, the CA cert, key, full chain, and all of these things. After sending the request, you will see that we are getting a response that the certificate has been created. And having said that, let's also see what is this certificate. As you can see here, this certificate will be used for these two domains, is valid to protect these two domains. So let's now try and create our application. Now you will see in the status that the request has been accepted from NetScaler, and it is also now processing now the creation of the application. So what we should do now is also see how we can update, let's say, an application. We are going to add one additional server under the hot drinks, because if you recall from the diagram, we said that we are going to load balance traffic between the two same applications. And we can see now from status that it has been accepted, it is being processed, and the response contains also this. But in any case, there will be several occasions where you won't really have the application definition handy. For that reason, you can leverage this structure that we are offering on the URL. And with this, you can see that under the beverage, backends, cold drinks, and servers, I can send now an API call to add one additional server under the cold drinks backends. So you don't really need to only interact through applications. And here you see that we have now created, added one additional server. But one last thing that we need to know, the next generation API is asynchronous, which basically means that whenever you are interacting with the API, it is processing your configurations, and through the config status API, we can find out the state. So here we can see that the beverage application has accepted the configuration. Now let's see if we can access the applications. We have visited the hotdrinksbeverage.com, and we can see that the routing works and the load balancing works in the two different servers. So the content switching, let's say, and the load balancing in the previous Nitro terms is already in place, and we have access to the first application. Let's now see also the cold drinks, I'm sorry. So with the cold drinks, we can see that again, the traffic has been routed to our backend. And again, we are seeing that we can load balance traffic to the two different servers. Now, during this demo, we covered multiple API endpoints. The reason for that is because we wanted to show you also why this API is so advanced and how you can be flexible when working with NetScaler. You could have done all of these things by using only two API calls, one to create the certificate and another one to create the application. But we decided also to give you a better perspective of how you can basically, let's say, troubleshoot, how you can also do things in multiple steps and all of these things. But I would say that moving forward, you won't really need to do all of these steps every time. You will just need to add the API in an automation pipeline, let's say, configure a couple of checks, a couple of, let's say, straightforward API calls to configure an application, and you will be good to go. Now, with that, I want to thank you, first of all, for bearing with me to discuss the API. And I would like also to ask Richard to come back online to have a conversation about the API and address any question that will be there.
Yeah, that was a great demo, Konstantinos. And I don't know why, for some reason, I'm thirsty. I need to get a drink here. So now, let's. When we're going through there, I think one of the things that intrigued me the most about that was you're not expecting the developers to know what are the guardrails, what kind of things do I need to make sure happen every time somebody creates a load balance virtual server. So as you stated earlier, we can actually set the prerequisites or the defaults on there. So I can say, whenever somebody produces an application, it has to have a certificate and it has to go through HTTPS. But additionally, I can say the monitors have to be able to check and see X, or I need to be able to employ, say, an API protection or a web app firewall function with that. So when they deploy that website, it then makes sure that I'm protected from a firewall standpoint. Is that correct?
That is 100% correct. As a matter of fact, during the demo, you would have seen that when we were assigning a certificate to an application, we were using a reference. Or in the same way, when you were configuring the load balancing methods that are going to be used, again, we were using a reference. That basically means that you can have your security team or any IT team that is managing the certificates to interact only with certificates. And then the application owners will never have to work with that. They will know the certificate name and they will just specify the certificate name.
And the other thing that I liked a lot about this was, as a longtime CLI guy, doing a lot of things from the command line, being able to have it go and check and see, is this going to be valid before I ever deploy it? You know, and when we're doing things in from the command line, I have to issue the commands, and then, okay, did it issue correctly? Did it actually show up, et cetera? So that's I think that's a fantastic capability. I also like, and you didn't really point it out too much, but can you talk a little bit about the ability to roll back if it comes into a problem?
Yes, correct. As a matter of fact, with the new model, because it is desired state based, let me take a step back and explain how we designed the API, because this will offer better clarity for everyone. So with the new API, we didn't basically focus on creating an abstraction layer on the existing API. So we decided to rebuild the system itself. For that reason, we have introduced multiple new services that are running within NetScaler, meaning we have several, let's say, services to do the validation, either it is static or runtime validation. We have additional services offering new security capabilities like a new RBAC system, or we have additional, let's say, new ways to store the configuration. So in the past, you would know that, let's say, when interacting with the API, with the CLI, you would expect to save the configuration to go to the packet engine and then be on the data plane. Now we have also a new data storage that will offer resiliency, and this data storage offers us a way to also roll back to previous working state of the system. So if something goes wrong, we have the ability to find out the last working state of the system and roll back to the configuration there. So there is much work that happened both from a design and implementation perspective, and I'm really happy about that and all the benefits that we have in the future, all the capabilities that we have.
All right, so that sounds great. So let's go down to some of the brass tacks. How much is this going to cost me to run this API? How much more am I going to have to spend?
That's a really nice question. As a matter of fact, the API is the native API of NetScaler. So it's part of the NetScaler system itself. There is no cost. You don't need to do anything. The only thing that you need to do is, in the same way that you are going to the CLI and enabling a feature, like the load balancing, the content switching, all the app firewall, to just enable the next-gen API feature so that you can start using the next-gen API. But there is no additional cost. It is part of every form factor, and let's say it's free of charge.
Hey, free of charge. I like the way that sounds, man. That's fantastic. So when is the next-gen API going to be available for general use?
So as of today, the tech preview is available both with the 13.1 version and the 14.1 version. So you can, let's say, everyone can start testing the API, can also preparing, let's say, the automation pipelines using the API. But there were some things that we needed first to fix before going to GA. Some stability things, some things related to more features to be supported, all of these things. So the GA release is something that we are targeting for late this year, meaning we are targeting the next December or let's say mid-December release so that we can make this available. So stay tuned. We are going to bring more updates on that.
Stay tuned. More exciting things are coming our way. All right. And so is there any training available that we can work with to learn how to do some of these calls or any of those information?
This is a really good question, because the way that we designed the new API is a way that can give you a better way to also use and interact with the API. Meaning, as I mentioned previously, the API was built using the OpenAPI 3 specification, which basically means that you can go to our developer docs portal, download from there the specification itself, and then use this specification with various tools that are there so that you can have a better onboarding. To give you an easy example. So most of us, at least me, when I'm using, let's say, an IDE to write code, I'm using the Visual Studio Code, which is an open source solution, open source tool, and it has multiple plugins. Now, what you can basically do is download our API specification, point through the Visual Studio Code to this specification, and then Visual Studio Code is going to give you autocomplete functionalities. It will highlight syntax errors through linting. It will do many things like that. So you can use an IDE, and based on our specification, this will also autocomplete every command that you are writing while you are using the IDE. But apart from that, because we know that we also need to have some material for our customers out there, we have created a really new developer docs portal. As a matter of fact, I was the one leading the transition to the new developer docs portal, and we have completely integrated the Swagger UI in our developer docs. So you can go there, read a number of let's say instructions, because we have a really good getting started guide, and you can use also the API reference through the documentation site itself. There are more to come on the developer docs that we are working on, but this is something that we can cover in the future.
All right, that sounds great. So the upcoming GA release, is it going to be able to configure everything on the NetScaler, or are there only going to be certain features?
As I said previously, we are the way that we are approaching the next gen API is to be application-centric and to focus on, let's say, use cases that are going to solve also critical, let's say, operations for the customers. For this reason, we are trying to offer, let's say, interfaces that are covering specific use cases. But that doesn't mean that we are not increasing coverage of the features. You are going to see a big increase of coverage in the features that we are offering, but we are first focusing on application-centric things. So you are going to see more things related to things that a DevOps engineer might need or an application developer will need. And of course, the big thing that is going to come with the GA is also support for application-centric insights. So anything related to observability will also be there in the GA.
All right. Well, I think that was a great discussion. Do we have any other questions?
I think you might have already answered this question, but what are the versions that support this new feature?
So the next-gen API is part of the 13.1 and 14.1 version. We are trying to always support the 13.1 version because we know that many of our customers are still in the 13.1. But having said that, I highly encourage all of our customers to start moving to the 14.1 because this is where many new features, apart from the next-gen API, will be there. So you will see many new things coming on the 14.1 version.
Yeah, there are some amazing things in the 14.1. So, and it has been out long enough. You know, we normally want to be a little cautious about jumping right on board as soon as it comes out, but it's been out for a while and we use it quite a bit.
And what about admin partition support?
Admin partition is something that we don't support as of now. So we are going to start working on the admin partitions part in 2025. This is something that many customers have brought this in our attention. We are aware about that, and we are going to plan this in 2025. So let me also share some additional things about what you should expect. So as I mentioned previously, the way that we are treating this new API is to change our philosophy of how you should, let's say, interact with NetScaler. For that reason, I have created this diagram to give you a perspective about how our APIs are being used. So all of the solutions that we have today are relying on the Nitro API, meaning if you use the NetScaler console, previously called ADM, it sends Nitro API calls to NetScaler to configure everything. If you are using Terraform or Ansible for NetScaler, again, internally, both integrations are relying on the API. And all of the other solutions are relying on the API, our cloud native offerings, our observability offerings. Everything is relying on the API. But moving forward, because we have released the next generation API, gradually you are going to see also enhancements on all of the other solutions. I'm not saying that we are not going to continue using Nitro, because again, you know that all of these solutions come with multiple features and multiple capabilities, but we are going to also offer application-centric capabilities to all of the solutions. So you will see also in the NetScaler GUI some new pages to configure applications. In an application-centric way, as we described, you will see also support through the NetScaler console to configure applications. And also you will see the same also for Terraform, Ansible, and the other solutions. There are tons of benefits for that. Apart from making the overall ecosystem application-centric, you will also have better performance, better security, because as I said previously, there is a new configuration platform that we have built. So there are tons of validations, there are tons of security checks. We are going to offer a new RBAC model for every solution in the future. And of course, we are talking about less API calls. Imagine that whenever you are using the Terraform provider, let's say the Terraform provider will not need to send multiple API calls. It will need to send only one. Same for the NetScaler console or all of the other offerings. So there are many things to wait for with the next-gen API. And just keep in mind that the next-gen API is the start. We are going to release many things around the next-gen API for our ecosystem. As I said previously, we have a really good developer documentation that we spent much time to design. You can see some snapshots below here, how the API looks. There is a really good getting started guide. So all of the things that I covered today through the demo are available there. You can also download the specification from there, or you can see live, let's say, the API reference from there. With that, I want to handle this to Rich so that he can share with us his experience using the API or the overall automation toolkit.
Thank you, Konstantinos. Yes, the NetScaler Automation Toolkit is a set of tools that is available today. You can go ahead and go out and start using all of these features, whether it's going to include into the next-gen API or the Nitro. It connects you up through Terraform and Ansible, methods to go with the different programming languages like Python and Golang, etc. You can the examples of code are available on NetScaler's GitHub repository. It is listed as the NetScaler Automation Toolkit. You can scan that QR code that we have on the screen right now, or you can just do a Google search on NetScaler Automation Toolkit, and it will take you directly to the GitHub repository, where you can see and download the different snippets of these codes. I personally use these in demonstrations to show customers how to deploy an entire NetScaler operation in Azure in about 15 minutes. So very, very useful tools with very little change necessary, just picking out, adding in your variables, and you're able to do the work. So what are our takeaways? The App-Centric Next-Gen API from NetScaler allows DevOps teams to focus on delivering and optimizing applications without worrying about the underlying infrastructure. APIs are designed to integrate seamlessly into DevOps pipelines enabling smoother automation and orchestration of tasks, from load balancing to security. Traditionally, configuring load balancers and application delivery controllers has been a manual and time-consuming process. With NetScaler's App-Centric API, these configurations can be handled programmatically, reducing errors and speeding up deployments. This API bridges the gap between DevOps and network operations, ensuring that application-centric policies can be easily managed in a unified way. The teams no longer need to manage each function in isolation, whether it's security, networking, or application deployment, streamlining operations and improving efficiency. One of the main challenges for developers and DevOps teams is managing the networking side of things, especially with legacy configurations. With NetScaler's automation and intuitive interfaces, teams can focus on the actual development of the applications. DevOps teams can leverage NetScaler's self-service options and predefined templates, removing the need to spend time on configuring network policies manually. This means quicker deployment times and more bandwidth for development teams to innovate and improve the application experience for users. By automating repetitive tasks like load balancing, SSL certificates, etc., teams can speed up application deployment. This translates to faster time to market, helping companies stay competitive and respond to changing business needs quickly. NetScaler is built to integrate with modern DevOps tools and workflows, offering automation and integration through APIs, Ansible, Terraform, and other infrastructure as code tools. This ensures that infrastructure management can be treated like code, fully automated and version controlled. As applications scale, NetScaler ensures that the infrastructure scales with them, dynamically managing traffic, performance, and security without requiring manual intervention. This flexibility ensures that it can fit into diverse DevOps environments, whether on-prem, cloud, or hybrid. NetScaler enables security features such as web application firewall, bot management, and API protection to be embedded directly into the DevOps pipeline, ensuring that applications are secure from the ground up. This ensures security is part of the development process rather than an afterthought, aligning itself with the DevSecOps model as well. And well, thank you guys. Thank everybody for being here. Thank you, Konstantinos, for joining us. It's a pleasure getting to work with you again. And I hope everybody got some good information.
It was my privilege, guys.
Awesome. Well, I want to also thank our audience for joining us today. I know how busy schedules can be, and we really appreciate you being here with us. As mentioned, all of the links and whatnot will also be in the notes of the YouTube video. So be sure to follow us on social media, find out when our next webinars are going to be. We do have an exciting series called Ask the Architect starting in January. There'll be live interactions where you can come online with us and ask questions in regards to NetScalers or Zen servers or whatever your questions may be. So thank you again. Thank you very much, Konstantinos and Richard. We appreciate your time and your attention to detail today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys.